thank you for you, Muhtar and Joe, for doing this. And thank you everybody for joining us. It's a busy day in Cannes. In the time-honored tradition, we're not allowed to take Q&A. We have an hour. But with my trust in BlackBerry, anybody wants to send me questions, we circumvent the regulations. Sorrell, 2 R's, 2 L's, at wpp.com. Now, we've had, I think, 6 candidates, if my memory serves me right. And we've gone through digital, we've gone through fast-moving consumer goods twice for 2 years. Media, last year we had sport with Sebastian Coe, and we'll come back to sport and sponsorship because that's a big part of what Coca-Cola does. We had Sebastian Coe and Ronaldo, and this year we return to our heartland. I guess the center of our industry, fast-moving consumer goods, and we're delighted to have Coca-Cola, which as you know has been voted the Advertiser of the Year. Yesterday, the EFIS Award voted the brand, the most effective brand of the year. So we're delighted to be here now. So of course, clearly we have some Coca-Cola advocates in the audience, maybe even some plants. Coca-Cola is an incredible company. It's just so we're clear, it's worth about 170 billion. Its biggest shareholder is Warren Buffett. So the first question to you is, what's it like to work with Warren Buffett?
I think we're very fortunate to have a shareholder like Warren with us for now over 2 decades. I actually invited Warren to come to our most recent shareholder meeting in April, and sat here just like we are now, sat on stage with him and just spent a good bit of time just talking about his views in terms of business, in terms of the world, in terms of where it is going, and what some of the things that how he would guide businesses and different businesses. And I think we are very fortunate. It's great to have the brands. I think that's Coca-Cola is 15 billion approximately of revenue. Makes an operating profit of about 11 billion. Net income of about 9 billion. These are the latest figures. And sells, in terms of PE, about 20 times earnings, which makes me extremely envious. Has about 150,000 people throughout the world in more than 200 countries. Now, according to the UN, there are 193 countries. Do you want to say a little bit about the latest one that you opened up in Myanmar? Yeah, Martin, but before I do that, I'd like to just point to the fact that the Coca-Cola, you just mentioned the Coca-Cola Company. Actually, we like to talk about the Coca-Cola system with all our partners around the world, bottling partners around the world, more than 300. Actually, it's more than $100 billion of revenue. And actually, if you add all the public partners that we have equity, and also then the total market cap for the system would be in excess of $300 billion. And it is a great system, and that's one of the reasons. And we proudly employ 770,000 people around the world, one of the largest private employers around the world, and actually is the largest consumer product system in the world, distribution, manufacturing. As you said, 207 countries, 1,000 plus factories, and one of the key ingredient for success for Coca-Cola is that blend, fusion of local and global that makes the difference in every market where we operate. We actually have local partners, we have local investment, we produce locally, we employ locally, we sell locally, we distribute locally. A couple of weeks ago, we were the first international business to receive a permit to operate in Myanmar, and we opened 2 new factories actually in Myanmar, and that is the 207th market, and we're very proud to
have gone into Myanmar. It's a wonderful market, and just at the beginning of a very exciting journey for the people of that country.
Overhyped Myanmar? Over-optimistic about Myanmar or not?
I mean, look, this, as I said, they're beginning a journey. No journey is a straight line, and there may be some challenges, but there's also fantastic opportunities ahead.
60
plus million consumers in the ASEAN, Southeast Asia, yeah.
Okay, so let me just, you raised there this question about, and I stand corrected on the scale and size and scope of Coca-Cola. But just coming back, you talked about local. Now, I remember that one of the previous CEOs, when Coca-Cola was not in the shape, or quite as good shape as it is now, a man called Dundaft, who said, famously, think local, act local. And I remember seeing him at Cambridge University subsequent to that remark, and he actually said to me that was the worst thing he'd ever said. That was the biggest mistake he ever made. Just tell us a little bit more about how Coca-Cola functions from a global and a local. What is the balance between global and local?
I think, let's talk about marketing, let's talk about communication. I think there's a lot to be said to try and scale up and think globally about communication, but then without local execution, effective, very effective, productive local execution, you actually won't achieve results. So I think it's that blend. Think globally, but act locally always. And additionally, I think you need to think in today's world, you need to think locally, act locally, and think globally and act locally. But local is a very critical element. But also global is a necessity to achieve the scale. And then also you need to ensure that you have a system that allows you to carry best practices into local markets very quickly, rapidly, effectively, and ensure that you can socialize what is working and what is not working, so that your system can actually then draw upon those successes and implement them on a local basis. Socializing what is working and what is not working is a really important piece of the success. Maybe Joe wants to add something.
Yeah, just come on to that. Just in the context of that, Joe, and I should explain, obviously Muhtar is chairman and CEO of Coca-Cola Corporation. He's been at Coca-Cola for 35 years in one shape or another, and since 2009 as chairman and CEO. Joe, more recent vintage, about what was it? 6 years. But with a history of Allstate, Bank of New York, Seagram's, MasterCard, Mobil, IBM, and I should point out this is a conference of lineists, actually. That Muhtar actually was educated, if that's the right word, in the UK, at the University of Hull and at Cass Business School. And Joe, you were at London School of Economics after Harvard, so this is really a reconfiguration of the UK educational system. Anyway, coming back to
hopefully a positive indictment.
And there's no damage done. Actually, it's quite obvious. Appearances being differently in certain circumstances. Anyway, Joe, just on this local and global, if I was to categorize clients, there are clients who believe in the value of networks and relatively complex organizations, and there are clients who believe in boutiques, and there are some clients who believe in both. I sort of put Coca-Cola in that middle ground.
Yes.
Would you agree with that? If so, why?
Yeah, I think absolutely, so Martin. We definitely kind of figure we need to work within the context of strong networks, but at the same time, we're always looking for that creative boutique who can come in and supplement with those networks. And I think part of a success and what we're trying to achieve is the whole concept of freedom within a framework. But within that construct, you absolutely, as we said, as Muhtar said, we want those great local ideas to come forth. Very critical for us. We believe that the networked organization and the network model, the evolution of a business from, local, multi-country, international, global, that network is the highest order now. Not only networked internally, but networked externally. And so, as I always said to Sir Martin, I don't really care where the great idea comes from. I'm I'm buying Ogilvy, or I'm buying something asset within a large agency, you need to find.
Even occasionally buying publicists.
Occasionally, and happily, actually. You know, they do a great job. They do a great job for us too.
It is the absolute truth that the best ideas today are not inside the company, or they're outside. And we must never forget that, and we have to make absolutely sure that you can create an ecosystem, incubation, so that you can tap into those best ideas. So for us, you know, innovation is always looked at outside of the company. The idea of the first plant bottle for beverages, where we make a portion of our, a blend of resin partially made from plants, that is conversion of waste, because it's actually not even plants, it's actually the waste of sugar cane once it comes out of a plant. We use some of that to blend in with virgin PET resin, up to 30% for the first time. This technology is applied to the beverage industry in the world. That idea came from India. That idea came from outside the Coca-Cola Company. It came from an incubation project in India. So we've got all these different incubation with technoparks, partnering with universities. It's all actually about one word: partnerships. How can you create those partnerships where you can tap into the best ideas and then bring them in when the system is ready to commercialize? And that is the key to success and creativity today in the world, and ideation.
Because I mean, you've been in the vanguard, both corporately and personally. You and Joe and others, Wendy and others, have been in the forefront of, let's say, the social initiatives, sustainability, CSR. Let me just come back to this question of partnership, because it's an unsaid thing here in Cannes. There's been commentary before it. The rise of procurement of finance, the Lehman catastrophe in September 2008, the rise of retail has put pressure on manufacturers, on the manufacturing system. Commodity price increases, they've moderated a bit recently, but that's put pressure. And pressure on the supply chain, which, whether we like it or not, we're part of. One of the things I think I'm speaking on behalf of agencies generally, is that there is increasing pressure put by many clients. We see it in this debate at the moment, if one can call it a debate, about payment terms, which has reared its ugly head recently. And that spirit of partnership you referred to, Muhtar, is being, I think to some extent, or is in danger of being eroded. And I mean, I think Coca-Cola has avoided that. I'm not saying that just because we're sitting on the stage and you're a very important client of ours, but I'm saying it because I think it is something that really worries the industry, and that it is being commoditized. I mean, the thought that a client would choose an agency on the basis of their payment terms is extraordinary. And doesn't that sort of undermine and undercut? You know, we're here in Cannes celebrating creativity, lions and Grand Prix, etc., and yet this is the sort of debate. I mean, Joe, do you want to?
Well, I think we certainly think you can't buy creativity like you buy pencils, you know, and so you've got to be very careful there and understand the value of what our agencies deliver as a partner is truly exceptional. Having, you know, in order to be a great partner, you have to share value. And with the agencies that we like are the ones that not only push us to the edge and push us right to the abyss and make us uncomfortable with a powerful idea, but those that push back at us. And it's a kind of a shared value win-win model that are not afraid to put part of their compensation at risk relative to performance of their work. You know, that's what shared value all is. There's upside and there's downside. So we think that, you know, the agencies that have confidence in their ability embrace that. But those that don't are they find that very challenging. But fundamentally, the creative industry this is without question, I think, an issue that has to be addressed, because we don't want to see our agencies as vendors. You know, we want them to be partners.
Yeah. Well, I think we're realistic enough to believe that we're junior partners, not equal partners. But it's that use of the word supplier and vendor that absolutely drives us crazy. Let me just.
I think you should label it as junior. I think to get a real good dialogue, healthy dialogue, intellectually stimulating dialogue between, in a partnership, one should never feel one is junior and one is senior. I think the critical thing is to create the healthy atmosphere, whether it's a partnership between an agency and a company, a consumer goods company, or any company, or a partnership between government, business, and civil society, a partnership between business and the university. I call it, particularly for trying to solve some of the big societal issues in the world, the Golden Triangle. More and more, we have to create better partnerships between government, business, and civil society in order to really look in the mirror and say we're addressing some of the big societal issues in the world. And the same thing goes for creativity all around the world. Best ideas outside.
Just back to Joe for a second. What thing, if there is a thing, drives you crazy about agencies? What really irritates you?
I think sometimes they sometimes tee up, in some instances, things that are fairly pedestrian that they think will accept without challenging us and pushing us to the edge, as I mentioned earlier. Really want them to feel that they can take a lot of risk. Muhtar's always encouraging us to take risk and pushing the envelope. That's the only way we're going to advance. It's a journey with an agency, and we're sometimes a difficult and challenging client. I'll be the first to admit that. But I think that positive tension can frequently get you in a better place. So the best relationships are those that have that kind of positive confrontation. That's where you get the greatest work.
Confrontation with respect.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you, from my perspective, the thing that would drive us crazy would be for the agency or the partner not to understand all of our stakeholder needs, which we today in this flat world need to, better than ever before. Not just one stakeholder, the entire universe of stakeholders, and bring creative solutions to leverage the opportunities related to all of those stakeholders. Not just the consumer, not just the customer, not a partner, but all the stakeholders, including employees, including government, including our people, including our shareholders, the whole entire network of stakeholders.
So let me just come back to Warren Buffett for a minute. So Warren has an investment in Coke of about $17 billion, about 10% of the company. And what's interesting about Warren recently is that he, together with Jorge Lehman of 3G, Anheuser-Busch, has bought Heinz, or is in the process of buying Heinz. We've seen the Benkiza family and I think the Santo Domingos buy DC Masters in the coffee business, Dalien's. We've heard rumors about hedge funds, Nelson Peltz and others investing, if that's the right word, certainly taking stakes in some of the major packaged goods companies. You can borrow money, or you have been able to borrow money, 30-year money at very, very low rates. In fact, Warren Buffett at the Microsoft conference, when he was interviewed by Becky Quick with Jorge Lehman, made the point that he never thought in his lifetime he would be able to borrow money at these sort of rates for that period of time. And you can buy what he called an annuity, tomato ketchup and baked beans, at what looks like a high price, but in relation to the cost of financing is a very, in his mind, sensible transaction. What that leads, certainly us looking at the industry, to speculate on is major changes in structure in the FMCG industry. Do you see that happening, or not?
I think it's happening just like it happened in the last decade. I don't see there being a big difference. You see what happened, all kind of consolidation took place in the beer industry. All of that did take place. None of that is new. I think there's one thing that is new, and that is, you called it, almost zero interest rates, and never has there been a situation in the world since actually right at the end of World War II. It's not ever since then where interest rates have been this low and are likely to stay this low. So cost of money is almost, when you put funds into a bank, they almost charge you for it these days. So that is something new, and whether that will fuel more consolidation in the packaged goods business. We'll have to see. I think it's just like almost zero interest rates have not refueled an economic revival as quickly as people had hoped. I don't think that zero interest rates are going to necessarily fuel a spike, big spike compared to the last decade of more consolidation. I think it's going to be, one at a time, based on opportunity rather than cheap money.
Except just one sort of, there might be one slight difference, that you've got pools of money now, private equity money, which are not the sort of classic, like I'm on the board, as you know, Formula One, that's controlled by CVC. Their time frame would tend to be 5, 6, 7 years. There's now family money. I mentioned Santo Domingo, you talk about the Benkiza family, they've invested in Coty, they just IPO'd it. Isn't this a sort of pool of money that might have a more, Warren Buffett, or they might have a longer-term framework in mind? So instead of being 5 to 6 years, they may let it run, particularly given their sources of finance, for 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years, and it will be longer term.
I think the difference between 6 or 7 years, a typical private equity in the past, whether you take Carlyle or KKR or anything like that, from the previous decade versus add another 3 to 4 years, I don't think it's going to really make a big difference. I think it's going to be based on what opportunities is private equity or more family equity looking at, how can they leverage. If they see an opportunity, they'll go for it. I believe there won't be necessarily a huge spike driven by cheap money. That's my view.
Right, come back to you, Joe. Coca-Cola always strikes me as being still, and this is forgive me putting it this way, it's still being a very American company. I mean, it is very multinational, it does operate in 207 countries, but the root of the business, or the biggest market, obviously 40% or thereabouts, is still in the US, and it's much less than it used to be. When people look at growth in the US markets, one of our board members, Sol Trujillo, talks about, that's Hispanic origins, talks about the new mainstream. Sure. Not just Hispanics, but Asian Americans and obviously African Americans. They are in the younger age categories the majority now of the US population. How do you, I mean, a lot of FMCG companies we talk to talk about the only growth that they will get in America, significant growth, will come from that new mainstream. Is that something that you agree with, think about a lot, and are positioning Coca-Cola, for example, in the US?
Well, I think the demographics get you there. So fundamentally, yes, is the Latinization of the United States marketplace. More and more our growth will come from that market. But also the substantial income in the Asian market is very, very powerful in the U.S. So we do think that, and what we're doing is we're pivoting a lot of our assets and our thinking and our strategy against those groups. It's critical to be there, not just be there now, but as they acculturate into society more and more, you want to be there with the right value proposition for your brands. And so we have, with the Hispanic market in the U.S., a very deep relationship with them, and we're continuing to go deeper, and that's only a good thing for us. So.
And do you think that generally people ignore these segments? Well, they're not the segments anymore, they are the majority.
The majority, exactly.
All the demographic forecasts are that they will become the majority. I mean, I think President Obama, one of the reasons he got re-elected was he understood these demographic changes much more than the Republican Party or Romney. And do you think that your fellow marketeers understand these changes quite as much as they should?
Well, I think that just like moving more of your money into digital, mobile, social is a slow process, slower than it probably should be. I think reallocating larger parts of your budget against these kind of very, very powerful and growing groups is absolutely critical. So, it's difficult. A lot of this is culture change, Mr. Martin. You get into large companies, they're very traditional, they like to do things a certain way. The only way you're going to get disruptive and break through and win in the market is when you take some risk and start to allocate against the influence of those particular groups. And that influence is growing dramatically. So we're there in a big way. Also the youth market. The millennial generation, this is the first group that grew up entirely. Actually, I think half the world is now under 30 years. share common values and common interests, and a common belief on society and the kind of things that they want from brands and they want from companies. And if we're not delivering against those expectations, they'll be ruthless to us. And that's why so much of it has to be around transparency and authenticity for our brand to speak to those people.
Well, one thing about demographics and the United States, I think, is that the U.S. is different from any other Western market in the world in that it does have a growing population, partially, of course, indigenously, but partially because of immigration. So if you take the United States of America, it'll add 30+ million to its current population by 2020. That's a big growth for any Western nation. You look at Europe, you look at Japan, nothing similar to those. So it's pretty actually some of those countries are going down in population if you take Japan, for example. Now, and that's why immigration policy is so critical to the future of the United States, and that's why I do personally believe that it will pass in the very near future, and I think that that is critical to have a 21st century immigration policy for the United States to keep the population growing, and that is one of the things that, one of the reasons why we do believe, not just the Hispanic, not just the Asian parts of the population, but the overall population of the United States is younger than most Western nations, almost all, and it is growing. Two very different factoids, and important factoids, why we are confident that we can continue to grow our business in the United States.
Right. I did hear one packaged goods company say to us that they anticipate their growth, solely that their delta in the US will come from these segments over the next 10 years. Let me just pick up on what Joe just said, Muhtar. He said that big companies or companies often don't move quickly enough. So if you look at Mary Meeker's data, or indeed WPP's own data, about how much do we invest with our clients in internet, mobile, social, and we're investing on average, about 20% of budgets. We know that the consumers spend about a third of the time. And going back to the Hispanic, Afro-American, Asian segments, we know they are underweighted and they should be weighted more for the growth reason. Why is it that companies are so slow to move? Is it because we're sitting there saying, give us your 3-year plans, your budgets, your quarterly performance, and they have to change the airplanes on the engine while it's still flying? Is that the problem? Why is it that?
I don't know about other companies, but certainly we, inside our company, number one, number two, number three, challenge and opportunity for us is to, in a large corporation, to act like we're a small business. And I think being nimble, flexible, and being first to move is critical for us. And so I can't comment on the other businesses.
But you've got 16, according to my data, 16 $1 billion plus brands. You've got 3,500 beverages of various sorts. I mean, how do you maintain that balance? And as you get bigger, however you define it, with the partners you have or without, how do you manage to do that? Isn't that extremely difficult?
Well, I think it's all about, again, the fusion of acting, thinking global, acting local, and at least 3-4 of those billion plus dollar brands were created in the last 3-4 years, all coming from different parts of the world, from Japan, from China, from different parts of the world, from Latin America, and more to come. And I think for sure there will be more to come. And we now are invited into the lives of consumers every single day, 1.8 billion times, together with those 500 brands and 3,000 plus products. And today it's all about providing the choice for consumers, the right choice. Proactively providing the right choice. That is the critical nature, and if we can continue to do that, continue to read properly, talk. Consumers no longer want a one-way dialogue. They want a two-way conversation. Critical. In the past, what we used to do is to work with agencies, create good material, have a good distribution system, production system close to the market, and it was all about creating positive consumer impressions. And once you were able to do that and have your product at the right place at the right time, that was the sort of the picture of success. Today, it's a whole different ballgame. Joe alluded to it a little while ago. It's about the expectations of our consumers are very different today. They want to have a dialogue, and therefore, we have to have the creative mindset to be able to create no longer positive impressions, but positive consumer expressions. Let the consumers talk for you and your brands. That's how brand love is going to continue to be created. And therefore, then the character also of the company becomes really important. Transparency becomes really important, because a good product with good creative is no longer enough. And what are you doing about the environment? What are you doing about societal issues? How are you partnering with civil society to create a difference? Those issues become really important.
Well, let's go into that in a bit more depth now. So, I mean, you've been in the forefront, again, both personally and corporately, chairman of the IBC at the World Economic Forum, lots of other things, Catalyst, Emory University, everything else that you do, Ronald McDonald Foundation, etc., all the things that you do, and then corporately, sustainability agenda, role of women in business, which is an initiative that you're taking a strong leadership role in, cultural leadership, some of the issues that we see in various parts of the world, like India and Pakistan, you're taking it for. Just take us through a little bit about the objectives of Coca-Cola in relation to those issues.
Well, first on water, we were the first large global business to have put out a goal out there about water neutrality by 2020, and given the importance of water to societies around the world, water neutrality is really important. We feel very strongly about women's role in society everywhere we operate. We believe that where women have an important role in society, a meaningful role in society, is where those communities will be sustainable, and therefore will have a sustainable business. That's why we put out another goal that says, outside of our company, outside of our ecosystem of 770,000 global employees, we will create economic empowerment for 5 million women by 2020, using our supply chain system, using partnerships, working again in harmony with government and civil society and business. So all of these goals related to the environment, I mentioned also the plant bottle and the importance of sustainable packaging. All of those help create sustainable communities. And so you would ask, why is Coca-Cola involved with 5 million, economic empowerment for 5 million? Because when you actually bring, and it's all connected, when you bring water to a village in Latin America, in Africa, and India, previously in that village, young girls and women used to carry water from miles away, clean water to the village. Now, water becomes available. When water becomes available, women are emancipated. Then you provide training, mentoring, microcredit, and let them set up businesses, distributorships, other kinds of businesses that are linked to our system, but not necessarily are directly linked to the sales of Coca-Cola, but they're directly linked to the sustainability of those communities where those women live. And then, of course, women employ other women, and then suddenly, money goes into the education system, and you've got power generated for kids to study at night in those villages, because one of the things that we've done through a partnership, again, with Dean Kamen, one of the foremost innovators in the United States, is create a machine that can actually make 1,000 liters of vaccine-grade sterile drinking water out of any water, no matter how contaminated the water is. As long as there's water, it will make 1,000 liters, and using half the power of a hairdryer, working on biomass fuel or working on solar power. So you bring that unit to a village, and by the way, there are half of the hospital beds today in the world. Just think of that. Half of the hospital beds in the world today are occupied by people because they lack access to clean drinking water. Half. So what you do is you bring this vaccine-grade sterile water to a town, you create a system where you can operate, and then you put a woman entrepreneur for each of those where they can have this pictured inside a 20-foot container, maritime container, which there are plenty of, sitting in mountains all around the world because your world trade has slowed down. And so you actually create a real difference in the community. And and it's all connected. Water, women, empowerment. And I think you need to think holistically in the world today like that if you're really going to make a difference. And then we've got great partners. Qualcomm is a partner because each one of these little containers need to be connected so that actually people have, in these villages, they don't have water, but they have cell phones. They don't have a place to charge them because there's no power and there's no clean water. So you create a little ecosystem in a village, 300 people, person village, and now people can come and charge their cell phones, little TV, they can watch news. It can be connected so you can give them training, language training, other training, simple accounting training to the women on their cell phones. That's how the system works, and I think we're very excited with this. We call it the Eco Center.
That's all very well and good, says my aggressive journalist friend from New Zealand. You can guess who that is. Last year I said he was Australian. He got very upset with me. But and he's saying, well, what about obesity? I mean, I'm on the Bloomberg Foundation there. Bloomberg has tried to reduce the sale of large bottles. So what about dealing with obesity and sugar consumption?
I'll say it this way. I think, again, golden triangle. Business can't do it alone. Governments for sure can't do it alone. And neither can NGOs or civil society. We have to partner to create the right awareness. That's why we have come out now for the first time in the world of food and beverages and made 4 global commitments where we say for every one of our brands, mainstream brands with calories, we will market and merchandise and make available a low-calorie version. So we will have transparent labeling. That means caloric, transparent labeling, front of pack. Voluntarily move it to the front of packs. Thirdly, have active lifestyle programs in every single country where we operate, in 207 countries. And responsible marketing will not market to children under 12 years old. We've made those 4 global commitments. And I think we are looking at industry to partner, looking at other governments to partner, looking at NGOs to partner from country to country. And we have in the United States, with, you mentioned Mayor Bloomberg, who I have a great amount of respect for. We have partnered with Mayor Rahm Emanuel in Chicago to, again, reduce the weight of thirst through active, healthy exercise, awareness, and it's all about choice. Providing the right choices. If I exercise today, I can say to myself, I've earned a caloric beverage. If I haven't, for some reason, because of travel, do not exercise that day, I need to have the choice to be able to have a great brand like Coke Zero or like Diet Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola Light, or any Sprite Zero, any of our other beverages, and low-calorie juices that have to be made available so that I can have them when I, for that day or for that period, have lack of exercise. I think it's the balance. Balance is critical. And we forget that compared in Western societies, be it Western Europe, be it United States, particularly in the last 20 plus years, let's call it between 20 and 25 years, we've reduced by half on average all adults in terms of the number of steps we're taking. And so I think we need to recognize that we are a company that communicates with our consumers. So we need to help raise the awareness of caloric balance, calories in and calories spent, and also recognize the fact that we need to make some of this fun. Because for sure, consuming calories is more fun than spending calories. There's no question about that. So we have to create some fun. So all I'd say is we're looking we're very serious about this. There's a conversation going on about this topic, and we want to be part of it. And we want to be part of the solution. We can't be the only solution. We know that. Neither can governments. And you can't tax your way or prohibit your way to a solution. We have got to change behavior, which is not easy.
Now, you mentioned about innovation. You and Joe both mentioned about innovation. Is there stuff in the pipeline or things coming down the pipe that will address this issue even more effectively?
Sure. Well, we always are looking at different sweetener systems. Innovation can be, so Martin, share a Coke with me. Look at that. There's innovation, right? You know, it's as simple as that. So innovation is not all in product. It's in packaging, it's equipment, it's in consumer engagement. So we're innovating at many levels, and obviously we're also, you know, the constant quest of how you take more calories out, things of that nature. At the end of the day, the product's going to taste good. If it doesn't taste good, people aren't going to drink it. And so the consumer decides, Martin, at the end of the day. But we're working on making all our beverages better. And the big thing, as Muhtar mentioned, the availability. Always have available the low or no calorie option to consumers so they can choose, not the government can choose for them. So we believe in personal responsibility.
And then take another innovation like the 21st century dispensing system that we have, again, innovated with Cayman, which can dispense more than 100 beverages, of which more than half are calorie-free. And the consumer has a choice now on an iPad screen. Instead of having just 6 choices or 8 choices in the legacy machines, now they can have more than 100 choices to mix and match and to make their own beverages or to choose no-calorie versions.
These are amongst your 3 million vending machines around the world?
No, these are freestyle machines, we call them, that are 21st century dispensing systems for quick service restaurants that are going into the United States and soon other countries around the world. And so, yes, you know, this is a journey. This is not going to be solved overnight, but we are serious and we are intent on becoming part of the solution.
Okay. Now, Joe, you joined Coca-Cola when Muhtar was running the international operations before it became chairman CEO. You came in under Neville Lisco.
And me though, he took the risk.
He took the risk. Good risk. Good risk. One question here is there any moment over the past several years when you feel that the Coke system turned the corner in getting your advertising and marketing back to where it is now? So it implies also that just like there was a challenge for Neville to post Doug, which Muhtar has taken on that challenge to get Coke back to where it was and beyond. Do you think there was a sort of
I think 2 moments. One was we started to put in the model of the really need to get behind powerful ideas and work on a global level. I think our most obvious example was 2010 with the World Cup, where we had 150 countries get behind it. And the whole concept was not to deliver the perfect solution to every market. We wanted to deliver 70 or 80% of the solution and have them customize it so it was local. But I think the other one that's in recent times and has played out here is a lot of great thinking came out of our Latin America business around cultural leadership. That, you know, we've always had talk about functional benefits of the product and then kind of also talked and communicated about the emotional side. And I think our Latin America team said, you know what, there's a higher order, and that was around cultural leadership. They provided that spark that then spread to Africa, to Asia, and I think that one of the things we're very proud of is the Small World Machines film that we have here that's won a number of lions. But cultural leadership, having a point of view as a brand, critical for us given our brand, and a little point that just a small part that we can play in making the world a better place. That I think has been a big trend for us and is only going to get bigger.
Why don't you say a few more words about Small World Machines?
Yeah, I think, those are the kind of things that they don't happen easily. It's basically taking your machines, the one that we put in Pakistan and one in India, vending machines, and, using it as an enabler or a tool for people to bridge misunderstanding, distrust, etc. We find that, particularly with millennials in most countries, they just want to have a relationship or get to know other people, and particularly when you've been in that kind of hatred between those areas, how can we bridge that? We're not going to solve the India-Pakistan issue.
So enabled by technology and communication portal on each of the vending machines, one in Pakistan, one in India. Consumers get together, talk to each other, can see each other, socialize, and actually realize one thing: there are more common things between people than differences. Everywhere in the world, there's actually much more commonality than differences. And that is the critical thing that I think we need more of today.
You raised a very, I think, a really interesting point in relation to Coca-Cola. I mean, I've noticed, say, our Latin American agencies have got tremendous traction with Coca-Cola. Is there something about Latin America that draws Coca-Cola to it, or the other way around? That there's a very special, in my view, there's a very special relationship with a lot of the creative work that's coming out of Coca-Cola, which emanates from Latin American markets, Brazil and elsewhere, Argentina.
When we think about Latin America, we think about Latin American Coke as a love story, and I think a lot of that is the passion that not only do our agencies have, our people there have, and the ability to continue to build that love for the brand. And it's something that's built up over decades. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's something where Coke has found that magic formula, that secret formula, to intersect where people in those societies really find is relevant and meaningful to them in a powerful way. And that can be anything from a machine to a big, powerful idea. And I think that's why that passion then is the thing that's driving.
So there's something in the Latin temperament.
I would say absolutely.
Okay, now that brings us neatly, I think, to Brazil next year, the World Cup, and the Olympics in Rio in 2016. Somewhat controversial, because there are some things happening in Brazil that make life a little bit more difficult, I think, for both the World Cup and the Olympics. But Coke has been a sponsor for how long has it been? How long have you been sponsoring the World Cup and the Olympics in one way?
World Cup since the 1950s, Olympics since Amsterdam in the 1920s. So, yes, by far the earliest supporters, very proud supporters, and I think that it's part of the DNA of the Coca-Cola system. Where there's sport, there's Coca-Cola. Where there's movement, there's Coca-Cola, and it's part of that whole syndrome of sports, supporting sports and grassroots. We have the largest non-federated football tournament in Africa, the youngest billion in the world. We created that, and we continue to support that. Where many professional players then emerge into the big league, professional league from those non-federated tournaments. We support grassroots at schools, at universities, everywhere, and I think it also is very much part of the DNA. And you mentioned Brazil. Yes, we all knew that when the decisions were made about Brazil, both the World Cup, FIFA, and the subsequent decision on the Olympics, there was always some risk. Where there's no risk, there's no reward. And I think the opportunities are so much greater that I'm sure they're going to be very memorable, fantastic events.
Will that drive the IOC when they make their choice on 2020 to a more conservative choice?
I can't comment on the IOC. All I can tell you is that I think it's wonderful that Brazil, an emerging nation, critical country, critical break country with such a large population, is host to two of the greatest sporting events the world follows. And by the way, also, we're very, very proud supporters since more than 40 years of Special Olympics. The foundings partner with Eunice Kennedy Shriver, Olympics for the Intellectually Disabled. I'm on the board of Special Olympics for more, almost a decade now, and I'm very much proud to be there supporting children. Olympics, the Olympic torch relay, Olympics itself, and Special Olympics. And I think, you know, inclusion is a very important thing for us at Coca-Cola, and that's why we're so proud to sponsor Special Olympics and support, be a founding partner.
Now you've even invested in Formula One with Bell. What was funny? It was certainly close to my heart, you know, and other people's hearts. But let me just ask you a frank question about Formula One, which maybe I shouldn't ask, but I will. There's a certain amount of controversy surrounding Formula One, the way it's operated. Is that something
From you as a director?
Yeah, I am. I say that. I say that frankly. There is a certain degree of controversy. Does that worry you as a sponsor?
Look, we've just it's a small trial with a very up and coming team, the Lotus Renault team, whose principle I have a lot of time for and trust. And therefore, I think we'll see how it evolves. This is just an experiment with a very small toe in to see what happens. And I think there is a following around the world, no question. And
following in the fast-growing markets, I mean, that's where the traction is really coming.
So now you can put on your positive hat as a director. and so we'll see how it evolves. But it's not something that, you know, in the scheme of all the things that we just talked about, it's just a very small sort of toe.
These are very significant investments, Muhtar, that you're making in, because it's not just the sponsorship fees and the top sponsorship fees. I mean, we calculate that for every dollar you invest, you have to put $2 in terms of activation. So a million means 3 million in terms of investment. How do you justify that at the end of the day? Because this links to data and to digital as well, because these sports have been relatively slow to embrace digital. They're becoming more attuned to it. How do you evaluate that?
Well, first, I mean, I'll let Joe answer the rest. But first, there's no question, sports is the single biggest pastime in the world on a global basis. So, you know, if you are serious about ensuring that, you know, you want to create brand love, and you need to be created through not just having a sticker on a vehicle or a sticker on a jersey of a athletic tournament. You need to create a positive consumer expressions related to your brands, like I've said, and therefore, you know, can you activate it in the right way to generate brand love? Can you create a digital platform, social media around, positive social media around what you're doing? All of those things are critical to the equation and have a good meal, make a good meal out of it. And so, as I said, you know, maybe Joe wants to provide more light about how we think about sports and our association.
Well, you're so right. It's not what you have, it's what you do. You know, how do you activate the asset? And I think we're taking a much more shared value approach. We think that our 2012 leveraging of the Olympics in London was a great example of that, where we had value exchange and shared value with the music industry, Mark Ronson, KDB on the music side. We had shared value with the City of London, where we committed to recycling all plastic in the marketplace within 90 days of the end of the games. We had shared value with Great Britain to help build parks there to encourage active, healthy living. We had shared value with our retail customers, where we did promotions all across Europe. So, you know, and we did it. So you have to take a holistic view of it. And you have to, and ultimately, of course, is it move the needle and sell more product? That's the ultimate. But there are many other aspects to it that we think can have a very positive rub on our brand, and we believe it's something that generates, particularly FIFA, huge amounts of passion, huge amounts of interest. And we saw, certainly, as we done in 2010, our FIFA involvement drove our business results in that quarter significantly. So many ways to look at how you measure success of sponsorship.
Is it highly quantitative, or are you saying that judgment plays an enormous part in your decision to continue in these areas?
No, I think it's both quantitative and judgment. Absolutely. We want to, at the end of the day, we want to be associated with events and properties where consumers and people have the greatest passion around it. And so, you know, from everything I saw, countries stop when the World Cup is on. You know, and for all those who said, you know, are questioning whether Brazil will be ready, we have the same questions about South Africa, and they delivered a tremendous World Cup in 2010. Now, I can remember from personal experiences, the concrete was drying on the stadiums in Italy for Italia 90 about 2 weeks before the event. So these things get pulled together, and what it does is it can give the people in the country a lot of pride and a sense that they can accomplish a great thing.
I think it's a lot of art and the science with it.
Now, Muhtar, a question for you from somebody from Mondelez. Muhtar, hello. In terms of talent, what for you separates a great manager from a good one?
Well, I think maybe the better way to answer it is what separates a great leader from a manager, and I think that is one that you know, is really critical in terms of your human capital in a company, and all businesses. But we give a lot of importance to that, and that is, to me, I think we are all. You know, it is one thing is to achieve success as a group, as a team. Another thing is to continue to repeat success. How many, you know, Olympic gold medalists do you know that have won successive 4 gold medals in 4 different Olympics? Now, and the reason for that is because it is much more difficult to repeat success than to achieve success. And as there's a physics law, you know, as you get higher, the air gets thinner. And so, I think leadership is all about, as a team, having the courage, and the foresight and the ability to listen to ensure that you can do everything in your power as a team to create the conditions for success. That is, I think, really, in simple terms, in simple Anglo-Saxon. The second is, what is success? And there, I think, it's all about making a promise in the future without a predetermined outcome. You know, you say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And you become public. I'm going to create, you know, double my revenues from 100 billion to 200 billion in 10 years. What it took me 126 years, we're going to do it in 10 years. That's a promise in the future. It doesn't have a predetermined outcome. That's, I think, you know, how we look at success. I'm going to create economic empowerment for 5 million women. I don't have a guarantee that we can achieve that, but it's a good challenge. I'm going to be water neutral, you know, and then you track yourself, and you hold yourself accountable, and you make the necessary changes to get there, evolve. And I think that's what you know, leadership is all about. Today, you know, we look for leaders that are as comfortable living in Munich or Mumbai or Mexico City. It's a flat world. Cultural affinity to different parts, different cultures is critical, and that's why we have more than 75 nations represented in our headquarters in Atlanta. It's the diversity of ideas, diversity of culture. Diversity brings the best, by far.
We're coming sadly to the happiness is ending. Sadly there, but I've got a lot of questions here, Muhtar, about slightly more controversial issues. And it's not just you're a prominent Turk. Your father was a Turkish diplomat, consul general, I think, in New York and other places. Obviously, we watch events in Turkey with close interest. We watch with interest events in Brazil. What may or may not happen on June the 30th in Egypt with this 12 million signatures, or however many it is, that's been signed in relation to the Constitution. And you talk about leadership, and we were talking a little bit before we started about the lack of political leadership. I don't want to really put you on the spot because I know it's difficult, but in relation to Turkey in particular, how do you see this playing out? Because, as I say, a number of questions from the audience as to your views on
I
that.
think, I'm not a politician, I'm a business person. I've been in business for 35 years. There's a lot of analogies that are similar, though. You know, in our business, we need to ensure that we listen to consumers, stakeholders. That you actually, evolve and make sure that you can actually act with what you hear. And what you see, I think, firstly, Turkey has been a very successful country over the last 10 years. It's always, as I travel around the world, it's been shown as a country that has tripled its GDP, created more than 10 million middle class, being top with Mexico as being two of the fastest, best economies, growing emerging market economies in the world. And I think this is the time to listen and to think hard and act softly and ensure that this could be a benefit and leverage the potential of what's happening, and which is some voice of dissent. I think it's really important. You can't in my business, I take an analogy again from my company. If I've got 770,000 system employees, you can't just make a portion of them happy. You've got to make all of them happy. One of the key stakeholders is your people. And I think similar analogies for governments, whether it's Brazil or Turkey or Egypt or everywhere around the world. I think the thing is that this is again a fusion of technology and passion coming together and saying we want to talk and we want to evolve and change. I think it's critical that this can be leveraged as an advantage for the nation, and that's what we're all hoping for. And I think it's important. You have to accept and acknowledge the success of the current government in the past 10 years, but you also have to understand that there are some changes to be that people are seeking, and I think listening and acting is really important.
Now, one final thing, at the risk of annoying the organisers, one question for each of you follows up the question that was asked from the audience. Great departments of that old-fashioned advertising agencies, it's digital, it's data, it's all that media, all areas. What is the, could you say each of you one thing that you want? What is the thing that you most want from this group of people? What is it you most want from your agencies, your current agencies that want to be your agencies? Everyone in this room wants to be working with you. So what is the thing that you really, that you miss, you lack, you want? What is the real key?
From my perspective, I think a better understanding of our business and what our stakeholders' needs are, better understanding, and coming forward with timely and creative solutions to leveraging some of that potential that exists with what our stakeholders are saying. That's what I think would be, for me.
Just challenge us, bring us very, very compelling, great ideas that we can look at and really push us to be greater. And that's what it is. We've made a lot of progress, but we really believe the best is yet to come, and we're only going to do it with very strong agency partners. So we thank everybody.
And will we see a female CEO of Coca-Cola Corporation at some point in time? When Hillary Clinton is elected the first female president of the United States in 2016?
I don't know about the timing, but I certainly very much hope that we will see that. And I will see that.
You're referring to Hillary Clinton or a female
CEO one day. We work very hard on women leadership. We are very serious, very hard on it. Back when Bill and I first came back to the company 7, 8 years ago, compared to then and what we've achieved today, it's a sea change. But again, recognizing it's a journey, and we've got lots more work to do. But we're certainly on the right track, and also we've just recently appointed another female director to our board, so we're working hard at that.
Thank you very much indeed.
Video, social and mobile, the 5 areas, the 5 legs of Google's stool, if you want to put it that way, are all having a positive impact on public relations and public affairs, and I think they're a much more important and effective medium of communication than they were 5 to 10 years ago, and I think it's broadly positive. Now, they may try to reposition themselves because they see temporary changes in the marketplace, but you know, if I look at branding and identity or healthcare, I could make the similar argument you've made, that they come under pressure because of cuts in discretionary spending. Because clients are being very, very focused on cost. You know, we talked a little bit about that on the stage and why people choose agencies, and you know, payment terms cannot, in my view, be one of the criteria for selection for agencies. But that's a function of the times, because life is so tough.
You know, I think from our perspective, public affairs, and we have a public affairs and communication, is becoming even more important. We realize that in our business we have value creators and we have value influencers. Unless we're actively engaged with the value influencers, we're never going to be fully as successful as we need to be. So that's why we've been dialing up our commitment to engaging with, whether it's NGOs or government. It's not just analysts who influence the value of your company and your stock. There's a whole serious group of those people, different groups that need to be actively managed and engaged with. Otherwise, your silence is seen as somebody. Oh, they're not commenting on that, and so. Active engagement in public affairs and communications is critical for us, even more so.
And so, Dr. Seguno from Edivia Express Milano, you said that the business is changing from the consumer impression to consumer expression. Yeah. This means that the media strategy of Coca-Cola are changing, and how will change in the next months in terms of investment and different media, and what's the role of television in that strategy?
Role of television?
Yeah.
Great question. It is evolving. It is changing. There's no question that you know, I think about it as, you know, everybody comes to me and says, oh, we had 1 billion impressions for that. I say, well, what does that mean? You know, I really don't need brand awareness, quite honestly. I mean, I love it, but I really don't need brand awareness for Coca-Cola. What I want is people expressing. So I think about the chain of impressions, expressions, conversations that ultimately lead to transactions. If we're not in those conversations, then that'll be a problem for us. So relative to media mix, you know, television is still going to be important. That's where people sit and engage and kind of tune out. But we see certainly huge trends in kind of social TV, people multitasking, particularly millennials. My own young teenagers who give me such a hard time. They're always, you know, they're multitasking when they're watching something on television. So television will still be a very important part. It isn't going away. What it is going to be is content that goes on every screen. And so the reality is, at this point, there's not enough investment, I would say, probably not even by my company, in the mobile space. That's where the eyeballs are. You got to fish where the fish are. So I think the one thing that we're trying to get our hands around is how much do we allocate to mobile, because it's a little less proven as a model. Well, maybe you can do mobile couponing. Maybe you can drive traffic to your retailers. Maybe you can drive traffic to your vending machines. All of those things are, I would say, we're in the early phases of. In fact, all marketers are in the early phases of that. So I think it's just going to get bigger, and ultimately it'll be a balance. The big challenge for marketers, you have a pie of money. It's not growing significantly. The big challenge is how you allocate your dollars against all these different endpoints. That's the big challenge for us.
I mean, optimization is key, but just definitions are very important here. Because when you talk about television, I think you're talking about is free-to-air television. You're not talking about tablet TV or smartphone TV, and the simple fact is that actually post-Lehman, when you would have thought that would have had a big impact, what we've seen actually is more classical, more free-to-air TV watching until recently. The recent Nielsen data in the US is very interesting because it shows a decline in TV consumption +3, that's 3 days after airings, to catch some of the tablet and smartphone traffic debate whether it should be +7 days to capture it fully, but what you've seen is a little bit of decline. Now I think what you're starting to see is a shift, to Joe's point, a shift in the way that people consume TV, particularly amongst lower age groups, younger age groups. And our deal with Twitter, which was announced last week, to look at Twitter data is really interesting in this aspect, because what Twitter shows you is I do think it's a PR medium, less an advertising medium, an informational medium, and you see this traffic that takes place whilst programs are on air. In fact, if you look at the data we saw at our stream conference here in Cannes, our digital conference on Tuesday afternoon, we saw some of these slides on data, or this data on these programs. Heavy traffic during the live airing continues, and then falls off. What this shows you is, to Joe's point, is that engagement on TV through other media, in this case a social medium, is very, very powerful. What is really interesting for the purposes of this audience, in particular, the newspapers in this audience, of the classical type, that we might even have some data which demonstrates that legacy newspapers, felling trees and distributing newsprint, and digital newspapers actually might be more effective in terms of engagement than we actually think. Because some of the traffic that we're seeing on Twitter seems to indicate that the degree of engagement, so it's not about reach, it's more about getting engagement and engaging consumers with the media. So I think you have to be very careful about definitions, and I think you have to be very careful about how where the technology is taking us, because there are some significant shifts taking place.
Can you give some numbers environment?
It's market by market. It's almost meaningless to give you a global number, because in some markets it might be 40 or 50% of our budget, in some markets it might be 5. So I think we're probably in the 20, 22-ish range now. That's been climbing dramatically. And then you've got to decompose digital. There's social, there's CRM, there's everything, mobile, there's YouTube, everything, all those elements of there, Twitter. There's a whole universe of how our people engage now. And I think everybody's just trying to find what's the right mix, but it's very much for every large marketer, you're just in the experimentation phase. But for millennials, they don't see their TV as their cell phone. It's a whole different mindset. They're screen agnostic. They just want quality programming and interesting content. Really, that's where it's going.
Sorry, we've just run out of time. Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you very much, Sir Martin.
Thank you.